All right, hello, my name's Stacy McCrae, and this is a presentation on chromosome abnormalities and a look at the effects of reciprocal translocation on reproduction. Today I'm going to start by talking briefly about cells and how our DNA is organized in our bodies into chromosomes. And from there, I'll introduce you to chromosome translocation and its causes, followed by the types and forms in which it can manifest. Now, more specifically, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be talking about reciprocal translocation and the effects that reciprocal translocation can have on carriers' ability to reproduce. Finally, I'll wrap it up by talking about treatments. So here we go. What are we made of? Our bodies are made up of trillions of cells. It's hard to believe, but at one point in time, we all started as a single living cell. And through cell division, that one cell divides into two, two into four, four into eight, and eventually becomes the trillions of cells that make up our bodies. And inside each of these trillions of cells is unique and personalized genetic information called DNA. Now, when we think of DNA, we can think of it as our body's instruction manual because it contains all the information that our body might need to function, grow, and develop. Now, inside the nucleus of our cells, our DNA is further organized into chromosomes, which, when viewed under a microscope, appear rod-shaped. They have a short arm called the P arm and a long arm called the Q arm, which are separated by the centromere. Now, depending on where the centromere lies along the rod, it's going to give each chromosome a distinct shape. So here are a few examples of some different chromosome pairs, and you can see that depending on where the centromere lies on the chromosome, they're going to have a slightly different shape. Now, each cell has a total of 46 chromosomes that are further organized into 23 pairs. One chromosome of each pair is acquired from mom and the other from dad. Now, the first 22 chromosomes are referred to as autosomes, and the last set, the 23rd pair, is the sex chromosome. So it's going to be different for male and female. So let's take a look at that. During cell division, chromosomes are duplicated in the process of DNA replication, which provides each cell its own set of 46 chromosomes. Now, oocytes, or the female reproductive cell, are often called gametes, have 22 autosome pairs and an X sex chromosome, while spermatozoa have 22 autosome pairs as well. However, they have either an X or a Y sex chromosome. Now, sometimes during cell division, our chromosomes might align themselves in an unusual manner, and this causes a chromosomal abnormality called chromosome translocation. There are two ways in which someone can be a carrier of a chromosomal abnormality such as translocation. First, because half of our chromosomes are acquired from mom and half from dad, it's extremely easy for abnormalities to be passed from parent to offspring. Now, however, just because one parent is a carrier does not necessarily mean that their child will be born a carrier as well. So if we look at this example, dad's a carrier of a chromosome translocation, mom is non-affected. They come together to produce 4 offspring. In this example, 2 are non-affected and 2 are carriers. It is quite possible for all to be non-affected or for all to be carriers. It simply is basically it's a chance of odds. So will the child be a carrier? Will it be non-affected? We don't know. The second and most common way someone can be a carrier is through spontaneous mutation. Now, spontaneous mutation can occur during the formation of the oocyte or spermatozoa, or it can occur later when they come together during conception. So it's really important to remember that although these abnormalities are easily passed genetically from parent to offspring, it's more common that spontaneous mutation is the cause of an abnormality such as this. So what is reciprocal translocation? There are 2 types of chromosome translocations, reciprocal and Robertsonian. Now, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing solely on reciprocal translocation as it is the more common of the 2 types of translocations, with an incident of 1 per 1,175 in newborns, so it is fairly common. Now, reciprocal translocation involves the exchange of genetic material between 2 or more chromosomes, and it's most common for this exchange to happen between arms of heterologous chromosomes, which means that they're not from the same pair. So, for example, chromosome 1 and chromosome 9 might exchange genetic information. So let's take a look at an example. So here is a normal copy of a chromosome from pair 1, and here is a normal copy of a chromosome from pair 2. Here we have an exchange of genetic information between chromosome 1 and chromosome 9. So a small portion of chromosome 9 is broken off and attached itself to the long arm of chromosome 1, and a small portion of chromosome 1 has broken off and attached itself to the short arm of chromosome 9. Now, because no genetic information has been lost or gained in this exchange, it's all still there, just in different location, this translocation is said to be balanced. Now, oftentimes an individual won't even know that they're a carrier of this sort of abnormality because it doesn't really affect their health or development. Something that might allude them to the fact that they have an abnormality such as this is later in life, if they start to develop fertility issues or reoccurring spontaneous abortion, they might seek out genetic counseling, and through that it might be determined that they do have a chromosomal translocation such as reciprocal translocation. Now let's take a look at the effects of reciprocal translocation on reproduction. Now, I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention it again. Because 50% of our genetic material comes from each parent, it's very easy for chromosome abnormalities to be passed to offspring. So let's take a look at some different scenarios a carrier of a balanced translocation may encounter when trying to reproduce. So first, the carrier's balanced translocation may not be passed on to the offspring at all. The child will have 23 chromosome pairs, all completely free of abnormality. This is obviously a very desired outcome for a couple trying to reproduce because there's no effect at all on the offspring now or later in life. The second scenario would be that the child may acquire the same balanced translocation, and because no chromosomal material has been gained or lost, as we saw in the last example, the child is unlikely to be affected by the abnormality. Now, although they're unaffected now, it could hinder their ability to reproduce later in life, and we will take a look at that in the next example. So conversely, there's an increased risk of a balanced translocation being passed to the offspring in an unbalanced form. So let's take a look at what this means. So we described earlier that a translocation is said to be balanced when no genetic material is gained or lost. Now, the opposite is true for an unbalanced translocation. So let's take a look at this example here. So the offspring received a normal copy of chromosome 1 from mom and a normal copy of chromosome 9 from mom. Now, when the chromosomes were acquired from dad, the offspring acquired a normal chromosome 9 from dad and the translocated chromosome 1 from dad. Now, because there's an extra portion of chromosome 9 material stuck here on the long arm of chromosome 1, there's actually extra genetic material. So with the additional genetic material, this offspring now has 3 copies of genetic material from chromosome 9, the 2 here, and then the extra additional information that's attached to the long arm of chromosome 1. Because of this, this translocation is said to be an unbalanced reciprocal translocation. Now, what effects does this have on reproduction? Let's take a look at that. This unequal disbursement of genetic information actually leads most often to a non-viable fetus, so meaning a non-viable pregnancy, because carriers of balanced translocations can repeatedly produce these unbalanced gametes. The potential for reoccurring spontaneous abortion or recurrent pregnancy loss is great. Now, it's important to point out that the American Society of Reproductive Medicine actually defines recurrent pregnancy loss to be 2 or more failed pregnancies. And studies have shown that carriers of balanced translocations are shown to have 80% of their pregnancies ending in spontaneous abortion. So only 20% of all pregnancies of carriers of balanced translocations are actually leading to a viable pregnancy. The other 80% are ending in spontaneous abortion or miscarriage. Now, while unbalanced translocations in offspring typically do lead to spontaneous abortion, there are other outcomes as well. Second and third trimester miscarriage, so late-term miscarriage, is also a possibility. Stillbirth is a possibility, and live birth with numerous congenital defects is also a possible outcome. Now, how do we determine which outcome is going to be? It really involves the chromosomes. So what chromosomes are involved in the translocation and what genetic information are they carrying? It's too much information to explain in this presentation, but I would definitely recommend looking it up in your spare time if you're interested. It's extremely interesting to see what genetic information is carried on which chromosomes and how translocations of those chromosomes may affect offspring and ability to reproduce. So I highly recommend looking that up if you're interested. Reoccurring spontaneous abortion can obviously be extremely difficult for those trying to reproduce. So repetitive loss of pregnancies is very difficult. But while it is possible for couples of translocation to eventually reproduce healthy offspring naturally, many couples, after suffering repeated loss, will seek out the help of a fertility specialist. Now, if the cause of this spontaneous abortion has been discovered to be chromosomal translocation, in vitro fertilization with preimplantation genetic diagnosis may be offered to the couple. So what does this mean? During this process, oocytes are collected from the woman and spermatozoa are collected from the male, and the egg is actually fertilized in the laboratory. Once the egg has been fertilized, a fertility specialist can actually screen the embryos for translocation before inserting them back into the uterus. So doctors actually aim to reduce the amount of loss and increase the possibility of a viable pregnancy by only allowing the balanced gametes or gametes without translocation to be inserted back into the uterus. Now, some people actually find ethical or moral issue in this treatment simply because multiple eggs are fertilized, however, only some are inserted back into the uterus, leaving the others to be discarded. So the fact that we're choosing which eggs to insert into the uterus and discarding others leads to ethical objection on the part of some couples, and consequently they'll choose to forego this treatment. Now, while some choose to forego the treatment, there are plenty others who desire this treatment and actually really would like to take advantage of it. However, oftentimes, this procedure is not covered by insurance. Actually, more likely than not, this procedure is not covered by insurance, and it's extremely expensive. So these two things lead to impracticality and unrealistic expectation of the couple, or an unrealistic treatment option for couples who cannot afford the treatment. With no cure for chromosome translocation and limited resources, oftentimes couples are resigned to suffer repeated loss with hope that eventually they will welcome a healthy child into their lives. In the eyes of many, however, repetitive loss and suffering is absolutely worth it in the end because the reward is a happy, healthy, beautiful child that they welcome into their family to complete it. So while suffering and loss is great when dealing with reciprocal translocation and reproduction, in the eyes of many, it's definitely worth it. So I hope that you've enjoyed learning about the chromosome abnormality reciprocal translocation and its effects on reproduction. And thank you very much for listening. I appreciate the time.